Have you ever had the feeling that something was wrong, but you couldn't figure out what it was? The most unpleasant thing about this is that it is impossible to get rid of this feeling. It haunts you at night when you're lying in bed and can't sleep. She hadn't entered my dreams yet, but I knew that if I didn't find the answer soon, I would. That's how I've been feeling for months. I don't know why, because everything in our lives seemed beautiful. Have you ever had a feeling that something was wrong, but you couldn't figure out what? The most unpleasant thing about this is that it is impossible to get rid of this feeling. It haunts you at night when you lie in bed and cannot sleep. It had not yet entered my dreams, but I knew that if I did not find the answer soon, it would. This is how I've been feeling for months. I don't know why, because everything in our life seemed wonderful. Both my wife Margaret and I have had very successful and busy careers. However, we have always put the needs of the family first. Our children became decent and respectable teenagers in their own way. Those difficult teenage years, by the grace of God, went smoothly. I was incredibly proud of how each of them grew. The Pig and Whistle restaurant and bar we owned was doing very well. The restaurant was a local favorite for its smoked pork and BBQ ribs with a variety of sides. Most of the profits went into a growing fund for our children's further education after high school. Although my wife and I argued about this because she wanted a bigger house. I prioritized giving our children the best opportunities in life. I thought, why do we need a bigger house when in 5 to 8 years we will be left alone because the children will leave us one by one? She was opposed to the idea of opening a bar and restaurant from the beginning, but I used the doctrine of headship from Scripture to strengthen my position. It was a difficult decision because I knew that Margaret was adamantly against it. She fought me with all her might. It was a difficult few months for both of us because it almost led to us breaking up. Margaret didn't like the fact that I had the last word in any matter. After all, she was a woman, and don't most women feel that way? Most of the time, she still got her way. Most married men, when asked, must admit that their wives run the house. Our pastor at church was the one who finally got us to talk. Margaret was worried that I was jeopardizing everything we had built together. In her eyes, I was jeopardizing her sense of security. To be honest, I didn't understand this at all. In a way, I have to admit that she was right, because if it had failed, we would have gone bankrupt. The pastor made it clear that we as a couple did not understand each other's emotional needs and intentionally stopped communicating. Neither of us was honest enough to share our fears or hopes. We were both to blame for this. Other than the general manager and executive chef, most of my staff were church members. Indirectly, it was their support that made the restaurant and bar so successful. The restaurant closed at 9 o'clock every day, 6 days a week. From the very beginning, I refused to open it on Sundays, and to this day, this rule remains unchanged. I didn't realize at first how much this differentiates our business from others in the market. Since opening, we have been a constant topic of conversation for everyone. I did this because after the Sunday lunch rush, most restaurants and bars were 3/4 empty. I couldn't bring myself to rest on Sunday while forcing others to work. The bar was open from noon to 1 a.m. in accordance with state regulations. We always had live country and Western music Thursday through Saturday nights. We had open mic nights on Mondays and Wednesdays. Thanks to the locals, it has become their favorite place. Anyone who could carry a tune was welcome. This turned out to be a smart move on our part. For many, it became a social event that was talked about for weeks. At least 3 times a month, we had songwriters performing their latest compositions to get feedback. Tuesday was a cultural night, and through this, we were exposed to music from different cultures from all over the world. Our small multicultural communities, thanks to the university, exposed us to their versions of what we called classical or folk music once a month, and these evenings were always booked weeks in advance. As a result of this, international university students often came to us because it brought them closer to what they had left behind. When their families came to visit, they would definitely come to experience it. Many of their parents told us that it helped their children cope with nostalgia. That night became one where my wife and I regularly visited the establishment as a couple because it exposed us to cultural aspects on an ongoing basis. Many of our longtime friends were made through these evenings. Over the years, I've learned enough to say hello, welcome, you look good today, and good night in 6 languages. An added benefit was that it brought me many new clients for my day job. From that moment on, we worked diligently on 2 parts of our lives that the pastor said needed attention, and it brought us closer in our life together than ever before. 5 years later, we both agreed that it was the best decision we made as husband and wife. Of course, over time, she took all the credit. Nowadays, everyone believes that it was she who made me do it. To those in the church and to the pastor, we were the model couple everyone looked up to, an example of what a family should look like. Our children did not have tattoos, piercings, or wildly extravagant hairstyles. When they attended Sunday service, they dressed with style and class. Oh, I was pressured to let them get tattoos. We ended up having a big discussion as a family because my oldest child wanted a tattoo. I applied henna mehendi to all of them. I didn't realize that this would be a real challenge for our children. When the tattoos disappeared after 8 weeks, they never asked to get them again. Nothing teaches you more than to understand from your own experience that changing your body for the sake of something will not bring the desired result. It really bothered me because I couldn't understand why I felt this way about my relationship with my loving and supportive wife. The only thing that stood out was that there was an emotional distance between us, and I couldn't figure out what was causing it. As far as I could tell, there was nothing that was causing this problem. I even redoubled my efforts to put her needs first, and even that didn't work. It got to the point where I was on the edge. I have noticed that this has been getting worse over the past 3 years. For 18 years of marriage, we were doing pretty well. We paid off our mortgage in 10 years and were virtually debt-free. We were blessed with 3 healthy children. Jean, our eldest, 16 years old, was a walking, talking mini version of her mother. Agnes, our second, 15 years old, was the one who owned my heart, inherited her looks from my mother's side of the family, and sang in the church choir. Wade, 14 years old, our only son, was going to be one of the toughest defenders you'd ever see when he grew up. Spanking him since he was 10 hurt my hand more than it hurt him. All 3 were born within 18 months of each other. Because of his size at birth, Wade caused a lot of internal damage to my wife, and she was no longer able to bear children. He weighed 10 pounds and 8 ounces at birth and hasn't looked back since. It took her a long time to recover emotionally. I was so concerned that I suggested we consider adoption, but she quickly rejected it. Once our youngest started going to school full-time, she went to work, where she remains to this day. During this time, she had 3 bosses. My name is Raymond Burns, no relation to the Scottish poet, although it was writing poetry that helped me win my wife's hand. I am an agent for State Farm Insurance and have an office with 3 employees, so I make a very good salary. Margaret works for the Cape Police Department and is the executive assistant to the Chief of Police. Family time was very important to us. But as is the case in all families, as your children begin to mature, their interests, thoughts, and personalities begin to emerge. Each of them demanded more time for their friends and social activities than for us. It is difficult for any parent to come to the realization that their children no longer need them emotionally in the same way as they did when they were children. But Margaret and I adjusted to the changes that happen as children grow up. Although we tried to live as Christians by actively exercising our faith, we did not force our views on others, believing that our actions spoke for themselves. Margaret called late that Friday afternoon to say that an emergency had arisen. They had another meeting with Jackson City managers regarding an expansion of the county jail and a new county courthouse. Both Peter Reynolds, her boss, and my wife had to be present. This didn't surprise me because it was quite common. They had been working on this for the past 3 years, and the project was now nearing completion. These sudden meetings became so frequent that they became a kind of norm. With our 3 teenagers, each of whom had their own plans for the evening, I had nothing to do. What I usually did changed because of spring break. I decided to stop by our restaurant for a bite to eat after I changed out of my work suit. Peter, my wife, and I had a history, but it was many years ago when all three of us went to the same school. We didn't see him for many years until 4 years ago when he showed up again. Margaret and I grew up together, literally from childhood, living 2 blocks from each other. Our fathers still work in the same factory producing washers and dryers for the retail market. She started being interested in boys before I was interested in girls. In high school, we interacted with different companies. Everyone had their own interests and plans for life. I didn't have time for girls. While most of the guys were chasing them, I spent my free time earning money for a hot car that I built to drag race with my friends once a month. I have to admit that I was obsessed with this. My grandfather gave me his love for cars and speed. As a child, my parents allowed me to spend as much time as possible with him. It all started with handing him the tools and asking me why. By the time I was 10, I was working alongside him as he built or repaired hot cars. 4 months before her fall graduation, Margaret lost her boyfriend in a drag racing accident. I wasn't there that night because I was working in the Taco Bell kitchen. Heard from her dad that her dad was furious that she was there that night because she could have ended up in his car. He realized that it scared him to death. Margaret and I knew each other then, but her company and their attitude did not suit me. Her friends were in it for fame, reputation, and attention. We did this for the challenge and speed. I ended up listing my last hot engine car for sale and selling it within a week. My father was shocked when he came home and found that I had bought an old frame from the 40s for $200 to restore. We had to pull it from a local farmer's abandoned field. To be honest, he was not in the best condition. He was still covered in mud and sitting on 4 wooden blocks. When his father saw him for the first time, he said, "What farmer saw you as a fool and sold that crap?" In my spare time, I restored it piece by piece, cutting out rust, replacing fenders, applying bondage and sheet metal where needed. Then I sanded everything smooth. The hardest part was finding parts for the chassis. If I got stuck on something, my grandfather would come and advise me. He, like me, liked this project. In his growing enthusiasm, he produced several basic parts for the chassis. He liked it so much that he came and photographed the gradual changes. The next free weekend, I painted it with a primer and undercoat. The following weekend, I painted it twice. Every metal part that wasn't chrome was now painted black inside and out. Grandfather thought the color was perfect. His father looked at him and doubted whether it was worth the effort. Over Labor Day weekend, with the help of a few friends and Mom's good food, we installed the new engine, transmission, and did all the wiring. A local upholstery shop restored and repaired the seats, which were ready for installation. Grandfather, having examined everything, said, "This baby is taking shape." By the end of September, I was done. All chrome parts have been installed. A friend who worked for an advertising company restored the Ford lettering on the back of the truck. We put white sidewall tires on it, and I put it through a commercial inspection to make sure I didn't miss anything during the build. Once it passed inspection, I insured it. The first person to see him on the road was my grandparents. I took them for a drive out of town in my new car before I was allowed to go home. I don't know who enjoyed the trip more, grandpa or grandma. Until his last day, his grandfather sometimes took him for a walk with his grandmother. We went to rallies and exhibitions whenever we could. Grandfather loved to talk about what I did under his supervision. Everyone was impressed when we showed the photo album with photos from start to finish. To this day, I remember the job offers I received thanks to my grandfather's pride. I was driving home in my new pride and joy after dropping off my grandparents when I saw Margaret struggling with her bags. I stopped and offered to give her a ride home. She went shopping in town and bought more than she could carry. To my surprise, she agreed. I learned on the way to her house that my friends and I were considered nerds. This didn't surprise me because I kept to myself and only had a few close friends. Restoring and repairing cars kept me busy and, as my father said, kept me out of trouble. She asked why I stopped drag racing. I answered honestly that the death of her boyfriend made me reconsider my life plans. It was time for me to decide what to do next. I told her that the sale of my hot car financed the restoration of the truck I was currently driving. She was surprised to learn that I had already been offered more for it than it was worth. When we arrived at her parents' house, I got out of the car to help carry the bags. I found out that these were all the materials and accessories for the dress she was going to make for prom. Having found the perfect material, she decided to go. She asked if I had a date, and I explained that I wasn't even planning on going. Her father was mowing the lawn. He stopped to inspect my restored truck. As soon as Margaret took the bags, I went out to talk to him. "Your father was amazed that you gave up racing cars so suddenly," he said, "but thought you were a fool for buying it. He didn't believe it was anything worthwhile. Man, you proved him wrong. It's beautiful. How much did it cost you?" "Not including labor, about $10,000, I said. "I sold my last race car for 14. There was already an offer of 12 for this one as is. I put it through a commercial inspection to make sure I didn't miss anything in the build. Once it passed inspection, I insured it." "It was a smart decision, young man," he said. He asked me to open the hood to look at the engine and was surprised that I didn't make any changes. He had many questions, and I answered every one. He noted that today's vehicles do not provide as much protection as this one. "Do you think you'll ever sell it?" he asked. "No, because the longer I have it, the more it's worth," I said. "Cars from that generation are becoming rarer. I want to enjoy them before I stop using them regularly." "Keep it to yourself, but my daughter Margaret is watching us," he said as we looked under the hood. I laughed and said, "Not worried. Based on her previous boyfriends, I'm definitely not her type." "Perhaps, but you are the first young man she has noticed since Ralph died," he said. "Perhaps she has healed and is ready to move on with her life again." After I closed the hood and was about to drive away, Margaret said, "Raymond, please don't drive away. I need to talk to you." I saw her coming down the stairs, and for the first time in my life, I saw her as a young woman and not just a kid from the next block. Margaret was a natural beauty. She was about 5 feet 7 inches tall. Her curves were slender and well-defined. She had a healthy look that I liked. Her reddish-brown hair was pulled back into a ponytail. The fact that she wasn't overloaded with makeup like most of the girls in her group was an added plus for me. I, at 5'10", had a well-developed upper chest, but from the lower chest down I was skin and bones. My family said I always had a barrel chest, whatever that means. So I was wide at the top, but narrow at the bottom. My natural curly brown hair looked more like a stylish afro the longer it got. Now I urgently needed a haircut. As a child, my mother always said that in winter I looked massive and big. In the summer, shirtless, I looked like one of the starving children from Africa. When I was 18, when I took off my shirt, if I sucked in my stomach, you could see the outline of my ribs. Margaret walked with a confidence that said she knew who she was and what she wanted. The white t-shirt she wore showed off the softness of her curves, but didn't reveal the shape or size of her breasts. "6 weeks until graduation," she said. "The first thing I need to know is, can you dance?" "Not really," I answered honestly. "I can probably cope with the square dance where they lead me, but that's all." "Why?" she asked. "I've never found anyone worth pursuing this for," I explained, not knowing what else to say. "For me, the desire to start dancing should come from a desire to please the girl I'm dating." "Then we'll have to train a lot in the next 6 weeks," she said. "And why are we going to do this?" I asked. "Because you're taking me to prom," she laughed. "Are you serious?" I asked. She took my hand and said, "Yes, unless it turns out you're not teachable." Learning to dance was fun. When the church had a graduation party, I went to check what you have learned. In the huge basement, my dancing skills improved so much that they attracted a lot of attention. 2 girls asked me if I had a date for prom right in front of the boys who liked them. Margaret couldn't come, but she definitely heard about it. Everyone asked me who gave me lessons, and I told them. The next week at school, many of the boys who were watching asked Margaret if she would give them lessons too. She replied, "If Raymond allows it, I will." One quick glance at me made them decide that it would be better to find lessons elsewhere since I had been involved in weightlifting for many years. The coach at school tried to convince me to join the football team for many years, but it wasn't my thing. I could play most sports, but I wasn't into them. Prom night was the first time I saw Margaret in a dress. It was such a memorable moment that to this day I can close my eyes and picture that image in my head. The light blue strapless dress hugged her figure, highlighting the natural beauty of her body in all its glory. Her cleavage was half hidden, but there was no doubt that there was a lot of it. I still believe that was the moment I realized I fell in love with her. It was also the first time I questioned why she was with me. She had grace and style that I will never have. That night couldn't have gone better. Although we were not king and queen, we were treated like a royal couple. Everyone was jealous of my old restored 40 Ford. If I was asked to dance, I always asked Margaret's permission. When the boy asked her, she did the same. One of the guards told us that it was nice to see such a young couple treating each other with such respect. The lady said, "You have something special. Make sure you don't let others' jealousy ruin it." Towards the end of the school year, we broke up because of what I accidentally saw. Peter Reynolds, the school's quarterback, held her in his arms. I was with a group of friends when we saw them. I stood there looking at them from across the football field as they shared a very intimate kiss. When one of the girls asked me what I thought, I replied, "Here is my soon-to-be ex-girlfriend, willingly moving from one man to another." That night, I went to her parents and told Margaret right in front of them who I was with and what we had all seen. When I asked her how long this had been going on, she didn't give me any answers. I said, "Thank you for wasting my time. I won't bother you anymore." She cried and seemed upset, but I didn't believe it because if she felt that way, she wouldn't have started flirting with him. From that moment on, if I saw her walking down the street towards me, I would cross to the other side to avoid her. Her father later told my father that even they didn't know what she was doing behind my back. My father told him that I didn't say much, but he knew that I was hurt. I went home to change into jeans before stopping at our restaurant to eat. Planned to sit at the bar for a couple of hours after. I was sitting enjoying my meal when Peter's wife, Tammy, came in. When I first noticed her, she struck me as a woman with many thoughts. This interested me because she was heading straight towards me. When she approached the table, I stood up. Tammy was not a local girl. She met Peter while he was pursuing his law enforcement education. Her parents were old money. I was sure that the only reason Peter married her was this. He left Margaret for her. Tammy was still a very beautiful woman with black hair, dark blue eyes, and a smile that turned heads. She had a slender figure that most men would want to hug regularly. I always thought Peter made a good choice in marrying her. Peter moved back 4 years ago from across the state when our old police chief retired. When he applied for the position, they liked the fact that he was from around here. After conducting checks and interviews, they reached an agreement that brought him home. "Tammy, long time no see," I said. "You look great. How are your children?" "The kids are growing up just like yours," Tammy said. "I'm here to talk about Peter and Margaret and what we're going to do about it." "There's not much we can do," I said, "until the construction is finished. Not with the progressive mayor of Jackson, who tries to control everything. He complicates simple things and seems to enjoy it. Meanwhile, what really matters is constantly ignored." "Is that what Margaret said?" Tammy asked. "Because if that's true, shouldn't Jackson Carter, sitting on the left with his wife, be at the meeting?" I looked and saw them. I think my face showed shock and surprise. Tammy was right. He served as a member of the Jackson City Council. "Sorry, I thought you knew about Peter and Margaret," Tammy said. "Their affair has been going on for about 18 months. When you hear that from someone you barely know, you start to question their motives. As far as I could tell, Tammy didn't have any. As a registered nurse, she worked in a nursing home from 3 in the afternoon until 11. I took her words with a grain of salt. "I have a prenuptial agreement," she said. "My concern is, if I act, how much will it hurt you?" "I'm not one to take serious things as truth," I said. I need proof. I thought so, Tammy said, handing me a piece of paper. This is the address of the house they are in now. It belongs to a guy who has been in prison for 7 years. Peter promised him a shorter sentence so he could use it. The idiot doesn't know that Peter can't do anything. How did you know? I asked. I took a regular day off and followed your wife in a rented car, she said. The last time Peter gave me the same excuse. Then I went to the registry office to find out what I could about him using my husband's home access to police records. I'm going to check it out myself, I said. Let's exchange cell numbers and agree to text each other to find out when it's safe to talk. If you're right, we'll have a lot to talk about. After saying goodbye, I paid the bill and headed out. I walked up to my car and said, Google, show me the way to 475 Old Cape Road, which runs between Cape and Jackson. It was a 10-minute ride in the dark of night. I stopped on the side of the road. Under the light of a street lamp on a pole, I saw my wife's car and a police car parked nearby. I could only wait to find out who would come to them. While waiting, I watched 4 hours of Hell's Kitchen on Pluto TV on my phone. Finally, the two lovers walked out to their cars. Before leaving, they exchanged a deep, passionate kiss. There was no doubt. Here is my beloved in the arms of another man. She again voluntarily moved from one to the other. It was sad because I had already been in this situation with them. Now I knew the real reason Peter Reynolds was coming back, and it angered me to the core. Seeing them together, I realized that I was right. Peter married Tammy for her family money. I started the car without making a sound and drove away, before turning on the headlights. Under the interior lights, I called Tammy on my cell phone. She answered immediately. Give me a month, please, I asked, so I can make sure they both don't know what awaits them. What are you going to do, Ray? Tammy asked. Bury them so deep, I replied, that it will take them years to get out. Now I know why we grew apart emotionally. Her mind, heart, and eyes were captured by another. By the time I got home, a plan had already begun to formulate to level the playing field before heading towards the finale that would give me victory. The woman I was married to turned her back on her family and gave her body, mind, and soul to someone else. Again, I saw her voluntarily move from one to the other. As a result of this, there will never be a second chance for either of them. I got home 10 minutes before my wife arrived. Luckily, our 3 children spent the night with friends. I quickly undressed, crawled under the sheets, and turned on the news. I knew that since I was watching the news, Margaret wouldn't go to bed until I was asleep. It didn't take long for her to walk into our bedroom and take a shower like she always did. I slowly pretended to fall asleep. Not long later, she joined me, smelling as fresh as she always did when she went to bed. She took the remote control and turned on murder, she wrote to fall asleep. 2 hours later, I went downstairs and found her work keys at the bottom of her bag. Using a piece of freezer paper, I smeared the clay and took prints of all her keys. By the time I go back to get them out of the basement, they will be dry and hard. Making copies would be easy, and I knew who to contact to do it quietly. My next step was to visit the man in prison to gain access to his home. It was the best I could do because he, like me, was fed up with Peter Reynolds and his broken promises. Luckily, he had the connections inside and outside to make what I had in mind a reality. It turned out to be the smartest decision I've ever made. I also sold him a new home insurance policy for his home. 4 weeks later. The smartest thing to do in a situation where you know you won't win is to remain calm, relax, and do nothing. Act like you don't care because that implies you don't trust them. They soon begin to realize that you don't care what they mutter. This angers the person who is talking to you. This confuses him. He begins to sweat, worried about his own disappointment. He really doesn't like the blank look on your face because it implies that you don't understand what he's talking about. That's what I've been doing for the last 4 hours. 2 detectives tried to question me about a man they claim had been secretly dating my wife behind my back for months. By this time, they were probably beginning to believe that I was a complete idiot. They hinted so subtly that I should have known about their relationship, although now they may have begun to believe that I was simple-minded. When that didn't work, they tried to be aggressive. Two detectives showed me photos of their secret love nest and explained that the meetings they allegedly went on for months were not real meetings. They explained in detail how they thought I understood everything and why. In their opinion, I had to do something about their beloved police chief, Peter Reynolds. They even mentioned that he had successfully gotten us to break up once before. I thought Margaret must have told them all her dirty secrets. Now they had my attention because I was ready to find out what these idiots would say in their attempt to break me. I sat up straight and stopped slouching and began to listen carefully. I showed them expressions of surprise, admiration, sadness, and remorse at the right moments. My days of racing hot cars were paying off. I learned then to develop a poker face. You always had to hide your thoughts and feelings when looking at your opponent. You couldn't give any idiot you were racing against a psychological advantage. I liked their approach. If only they knew that I thought they were stupid and treated them as such. The only game they had left was bad cop and good cop against me. 2 days ago, my beloved wife went to their special place, only to find her lover missing. She found a police uniform, wallet, pistol, holster, watch, and ring. She called the police in a panic, reporting a possible crime scene, and left the house without touching anything to protect the evidence. What she didn't realize until the last moment was that she would have to explain why she was there. Her little situation became very serious quickly because of the person's personality. Plus, his police car was parked right next to hers. She was forced to reveal her 19-month affair with her superior, a respected and revered police chief. When detectives investigating the situation asked who might have known about their relationship, she said she had no idea. In desperation, after repeated questioning, she said, "The last person I would suspect is my husband Raymond, because he always works in our bar on Friday and Saturday nights." She didn't realize that I was working on a special project at the request of our pastor, so I hadn't been to the bar in months. When I returned home that night, she was an emotional wreck. I tried to get her to explain what was bothering her, just like our children. She explained that her experiences were just emotional moments associated with change. What puzzled investigators was that his gun was not used. There were no signs of a struggle. There were only 2 glasses of wine, a dozen red roses in a box, and 2 bottles of wine in the refrigerator. It looked like it was going to be a romantic night for 2. It didn't take long before the cops determined that I wasn't where my wife thought I was and hadn't been there for weeks. 2 detectives suggested that I didn't have an alibi. For some reason, no one could find me. To them, because of what they thought they knew, I automatically became the prime suspect. This Sunday, after morning service, as we were finishing up our conversation with the pastor, 2 detectives came to take me away for questioning. It was absolutely humiliating to be caught by them in such a public place. I understood perfectly well that they were in a complete state of panic. If Peter Reynolds is still alive, he must be in need of medical attention. His life could have been in danger. Our 3 children were completely upset. I could tell by the look on Margaret's face that she hadn't expected this. Pretending that I didn't understand why they wanted to talk to me, I refused to go and said that I would go home, heading to the car. They arrested me for aiding and abetting possible murder. They handcuffed me and started leading me to the car. My 3 children started crying. Both our parents stood in shock. As they led me away, I turned to my wife and said in a cold voice, "What did you say about me again, Margaret?" Her face turned pale. Our parents saw it all, as did members of our community. I blamed everything that was happening on her, knowing what kind of rumors this would cause. When they put me in the police car, I turned and smiled at my wife. I knew that within half an hour, everyone would believe that my wife was behind the fact that I was taken to the police. My wife must have betrayed me, but why? What did she say about me that caused this? On Friday evening, 2 of my Chinese brothers from our small property owner organization loaded it into an open box on an empty truck. Unfortunately, he didn't know that he had been given a couple of doses of good drugs into his evening drinks and then given a drop of chloroform, which kept him unconscious for the next few days. If they dosed correctly, he should be awake in about half an hour. My job was to be the idiot that the police would focus on. The longer they kept me, the better. So far, everything has been going better than planned. Moving the side of the box would cause it to fall apart, releasing him naked. The only problem is, he could have ended up anywhere. We were kind enough to leave him an orange jumpsuit for him to wear. It was the same one worn by inmates in the county jail. The pocket was marked, "Property of Cape Girardeau County Jail." I thought it wouldn't be until the truck's next stop that his loud cries would attract enough attention to be discovered. By then, he will be trying to explain who he is without any evidence. If we didn't give him enough for his size and weight, he might have woken up a long time ago. So, after 4 hours of pretending, I finally spoke up. "Can I perhaps get a cup of strong black tea?" They took it as a sign of progress. I started opening up to them. One of the detectives left the room and was gone for about 15 minutes. His partner began to worry that he had been gone for so long. He returned with a white face and behaved somewhat timidly. The young detective realized that something had changed. "Mr. Burns, we owe you an apology," the senior detective said. "It appears the boss had been drinking too much and got himself into a situation he shouldn't have been in. When he was found, he was hungover in an empty truck at the border in Sumas, Washington, on his way to Canada. He was wearing a stolen orange jumpsuit. Now we have his own words that it was entirely his business. He said that he could not explain anything, since his mind was foggy. That must have been one hell of a bender. How long have you all been hiding the fact that he's just an alcoholic? Does he have frequent blackouts? Guess I'll have to buy myself a cup of tea," I said. "Can one of you direct me to the nearest place where I can get it? I need to think it over and get it down on paper before I contact an attorney with a civil lawsuit against the police department for false arrest." Both detectives' faces turned white. I spoke with confidence and authority. They now knew that I was not impressed with what had happened. Ask yourself why the boss wanted to have an alibi for the weekend that couldn't be disproved. Why did my better half, his admitted mistress, according to what you've been telling me for the last 4 hours, want me to be arrested? I asked, looking straight at them. Perhaps if you look at them as closely as you look at me, you will find that they are both trying to protect themselves. "Are you implying that we were set up on purpose?" asked the young detective. "No, I'm just wondering why they thought I needed an alibi with you for that day. Now, if you return my cell phone," I said, "I want to leave here and head to the restaurant for a cup of black tea since you two refused to bring me one." We were almost to the front door when the officer on duty said, "Mr. Burns, the alarm at the Pig and Whistle went off just over 2 hours ago, and our officers are already there investigating the incident. It appears that whoever broke in had a key and knew the combination to the safe." "Damn," I said. "There was over 20,000 in cash in the safe at 11 o'clock last night." The two detectives looked at me in complete shock when I said, "I think now I understand why they wanted me here." With that, I walked out the front door and headed towards my restaurant and bar. I needed to see what damage was done when they broke in. I walked about half a block when a young policeman offered me a ride. When I got into the front passenger seat, he said that he was ordered to take me there. Before him, I called Margaret, my future ex-wife. She answered the first call. I knew that he was ordered to record everything on a video camera. "The detectives finally released me after dropping the charges," I said. "It appears that Peter Reynolds, your lover, as they explained to me, is alive and well. I think you should feel very relieved. Based on what I learned, I wondered if you were trying to get even with Peter for stealing you from Tammy. The police are taking me to the Pig and Whistle because they broke into it while I was at the police station today. You and your longtime lover may have been planning this all to destroy my reputation in the upcoming divorce." I hung up and said, "Imagine," she ended the call before I finished speaking. "Why would she do that if she didn't want to answer my questions? I wonder what else she's hiding." I called my parents, and when my father answered, I said, "Dad, can you do me a favor with Mom?" After my father agreed, I said, Call Margaret. Tell her you're coming to get my things and the keys to my truck. Then bring them both to Pig and Whistle. I'm going there with the police. All charges against me have been dropped. So I plan to file a lawsuit against them for false arrest and public defamation. It seems that I may have been deliberately framed by someone with inside knowledge of the workings of the police department. What the hell is going on, Ray? Asked my father. Oh, you didn't know, I said. The police arrested me because they suspected I had killed my wife's lover, Peter Reynolds, the chief of police. Hell, I didn't even know they were having an affair until the detectives told me about it during interrogation. I looked at the young policeman's face. It was white as snow. I knew he believed what he heard. I smiled because no one would have known what kind of magic could be created with a few key prints in Play-Doh and paying property taxes in the name of the police chief in cash. For some reason, a policeman stopped on his way to my bar to buy me the largest glass of hot black tea he could find. During the trip, the pastor of our church and a young child member of our church showed up at the police station to give me an alibi. Detectives learned that I had been spending time working with this child for several months as a member of the Big Brother organization. The congregation provided money for a project I was working on. The young man and I spent Friday and Saturday working on restoring the car. We kept it a secret because it was supposed to be a surprise for his single mother whose birthday was coming up. It would be the first car she ever owned as a single mother. For those detectives, it couldn't have been worse. They saw their future employment slip away because of how incompetent the police department looked. The pastor brought journalists with him. They had to explain everything. It should have been on the 10 o'clock news and in the paper on Monday. I arrived to find that the back door had been used for access. I told the officer that this implied that the person had knowledge of the layout to evade the security system. This should have been an internal matter. The only people who have keys to the office are the two managers, my wife and me. The police made a mess trying to find fingerprints. I reminded them that mine were taken when I was arrested and photographed. I was treated with the utmost respect. They were almost finished when I asked them if they knew a locksmith who would be willing to come and change the locks on Sunday night. Luckily, they knew, and I called him. It would be expensive, but they all agreed it was the best way to make sure the place would be safe. I pointed out that the bank's overnight deposit bag containing the money was missing. With their permission, I took my bank ledger and used the printer to make a copy for them. It was noted that I deposited 10 checks. Is it important? I asked. Only if we find them in a place they shouldn't be. Few people knew that these 10 receipts would be found in a locked drawer in the police chief's office at the station later that week. The money will never be found. Mom and Dad arrived just as the locksmith arrived. He replaced 5 locks and gave me 4 copies that I needed. After he left, we sat and talked over a drink at the bar. They were devastated to learn how I discovered my wife's affair that afternoon. Dad thought he should call Margaret's father and let him know. Then my side learned that this was not the first time Peter Reynolds interfered in my relationship with my wife. This time it will be the last. Mom said I could stay with them until I figured everything out. As soon as my children found out that I had been released, they called me. I explained to each of them individually what I had learned at the police station and told them that I would be staying with their grandparents for the time being. They were shocked to learn that their mother had been cheating for a long time. After my parents left, I closed and sat in my pride and joy that I had had for over 18 years. It was in perfect condition, and I usually drove it to car shows or rallies. In privacy, I texted Tammy, "You can talk." It only took a few seconds before my cell phone rang. "Raymond, are you okay?" Tammy asked. "I'm holding on," I said. "It was quite a stressful day finding out about my wife's affair with your husband. How did you deal with it? I'm guessing you found out about it on Friday night." "It was shocking," she replied. "Can we meet and talk about this?" "I was just about to go to Cracker Barrel for dinner," I said. "You can join me there if you want." "I'm on my way," Tammy said. "I'll wait for you in their sales department." She was there when I arrived. We must have looked like an odd couple, she in jeans, me in a suit for church. We asked the hostesses to give us a place with some privacy. Luckily, it wasn't crowded at this time of the evening. After ordering what we wanted, we began to talk quietly. I was completely shocked when detectives came to my work Friday night to tell me what they had found, Tammy said. Then I remembered you said, give me 4 weeks. I told the officers that in my heart I didn't believe he was dead, Tammy said. Then they asked me if I knew about Peter's affair. What's the matter? I said. Then they had to explain how they found out. I pretended to be as shocked as you, I said. I never suspected that I would be arrested so publicly. I left detectives with many questions that would require further investigation. The beauty is that your wife was forced to expose them both, Tammy said. It eliminates a lot of nonsense ahead. Be prepared. The detectives will ask you if your husband has a drinking problem, I said. I left the impression that he has. It's an easy fix, Tammy said. I'll just say that I believe he has, but Peter is still in denial. I'll go see Dale Britton tomorrow to see if he'll represent me, I said. I will add more pressure to the situation by filing a civil lawsuit against the city police department, your husband, and, of course, a divorce from my wife. I will instruct my lawyer to issue a legal notice, she said, that I am no longer responsible for his debts. Tammy, I said, there's something else you need to know. During my last year of school, when Margaret and I were dating, we broke up because your husband interfered in our relationship. He left her for you, just like she did to me. I was wondering, did Margaret go after Peter to settle a score? This revelation explained a lot for her. I knew Margaret had a new enemy for life. So when did you and Margaret get back together? She asked. About 8 months after the announcement of your wedding, I said, which was published in the local newspaper. Margaret Burns sat there trying to figure out how things could have gone so wrong so quickly. It was a complete shock to her when the police arrested her husband just as they were preparing to go out for their usual Sunday lunch together. The coldness in Ray's voice when he said, "Why are you blaming me now, Margaret?" said everything. This immediately raised many questions. Unfortunately, none of them could be answered due to her need to keep her behavior a secret. Now both sides of their families knew about her affair. Her own 3 children were crying upstairs. The way Ray found out about this must have been devastating to him. Which didn't make sense. If Peter Reynolds was alive, why didn't he contact her? Each of their children came downstairs one at a time to tell her that they had spoken with their father after his parents had come to collect his personal belongings. It was then that she learned that her husband had explained to them all that he had been arrested because they suspected that he had killed his wife's lover until he was found alive. Ray explained that someone had played a very serious prank that had gone too far. When they asked him why, he explained, "Someone wanted the behavior of your mother and her lover to be made public. I think it's someone he helped put away. I hope they call the state to investigate the whole situation because it now looks like the reputation of the Cape City Police has been called into question." Ray directly accused them that it was all because of their work. His arrest, the break-in at their restaurant, and the destruction of 2 marriages were starting to look like one huge plan. What Margaret didn't know was that the children held a family meeting among themselves in one of the bedrooms and jointly decided that when the divorce was finalized, they would go to live with their father. Margaret regretted ever getting involved with Peter after he left her. She knew that he was a user of people to the extreme. It was at her father's annual company picnic 2 years later that Ray and she started talking to each other again. It was only a few weeks after that outing that she learned from friends how much she had hurt him. She didn't realize that he was madly in love with her. For her, then, he was just a friend. Many said it changed him forever, and they were right. The Raymond she met that day was unknown to her. He was a man who kept to himself and didn't talk much. There was a distance and a cold that she had never seen before. Although he walked proud and tall, he walked alone. They exchanged only a few words that first day, and he refused to discuss what he did. His previous openness disappeared. Her parents later revealed that he hasn't dated anyone since she left. A crash on Interstate 55 a few months later changed everything. She punctured a tire while speeding, lost control, and rolled over several times. The car started to burn. Ray, driving in the other direction, stopped on the side of the road. He made his way through the smoke to the front seat to unbuckle his seat belt and pull her out. Until she was safe, he didn't even know it was her. He held her until first responders arrived, then called her parents to tell them what had happened. She was semi-conscious, but heard him telling her that he still loved her and to hold on. She recovered for more than a week, and when he didn't work, he was next to her. Her perspective on the kind of love she was looking for changed, and she began to see Ray in a different light. 8 months later, she became his wife. She grew to love him over time, but she was never as in love with him as he was with her. All was well until Peter Reynolds came back into her life, looking as good as ever. Over time, he swept her off her feet, and they became lovers. No man had ever inspired such passion or emotion in her as Peter had. Peter gave her that spark and excitement that young love meant to her for the first time. She felt like a young girl with great passion again. They both felt an attraction as soon as he took up his position. It didn't take long before they were unable to resist the desire they felt for each other. Now 2 families have been destroyed. Ray, her husband, had been hurt beyond measure, and unfortunately, she knew better than most that he didn't deserve it. Raymond was a good husband and provider throughout their marriage. She was still lost in thought when the eldest child entered the room. "Mom, the 3 of us were upstairs talking," Jean said firmly. "We decided that since I'm the eldest, I should let you know that we will be living with Dad once the divorce is finalized. That way, you can have the quality life you seem to want with Mr. Reynolds." Margaret just started crying. Her own behavior had cost her everything, and the only one she could blame was herself. Her eldest daughter, a mini version of herself, put it well, pointing out what her own behavior was saying. "I was at the Pig and Whistle early this morning. I needed to let the staff in. Those who had to be here so early watched the 4 o'clock morning news. Everyone dealt with the information that was revealed. This made me declare that Pig and Whistle will remain open no matter what. I gave the restaurant manager new keys and a new combination to the safe. I gave her the bar manager's kit and instructed her to give him the combination to the safe. She was surprised that I didn't suspect the staff. She assigned one of the employees to do fingerprint cleaning and deep clean the back and my office. The weekday opening was above normal. While waiting for my breakfast, I realized that many had come out of curiosity. After that, I went about my normal activities. My staff was very supportive of me and what I was going through. I called Dale Britton's office and was able to schedule an appointment for 1 p.m. In the morning, I answered calls and did small things. As soon as I arrived at his office, I knew he would take the case. Dale never liked the new police chief who came in after he left. Dale considered Peter Reynolds to be an arrogant, narcissistic scoundrel who had the skills for the job, but was always looking for profit. Once Margaret reached the office, the 2 detectives went to her office to have a long conversation with her. They wanted to know if her husband would file a lawsuit. She said, "He really has no choice. You destroyed his reputation by jumping to conclusions, exposing Peter and I's affair to him and ruining his life as he knew it as a result. You seem to have completely ignored what Peter was doing after he left work on Friday. If it was a setup, as my husband believes," Margaret said, "you need to find out who and why. My question is, where was Peter found?" "In the back of a truck near the border, in a town in Washington state," the senior detective said. "The question arises whether Peter was on a drinking binge and lost consciousness. Comparing him to my husband, I would say his drinking might be excessive, but I've never seen him drunk," Margaret explained. "This question should really be directed to his wife." The midday news announced that the mayor had asked the state to investigate the situation. 6 days later, on Sunday, the pastor called the single mother and handed her the car keys after the service. It was not new, but is now in perfect condition and fully insured. I watched as he explained that her 10-year-old son and I had worked together to restore her to this state. It was impossible not to be touched by her emotional reaction and pure tears of joy. My children saw my Ford pickup as soon as they arrived and joined me to sit with me during the service. I was surprised that Margaret was not present. It was the first service she had missed in months. Then it dawned on me that she couldn't cope with the looks and whispers behind her back. My 3 children walked 2 miles to get here. I couldn't help but be proud of them. My 2 daughters proudly held my hand as the single mother praised me over and over again for the knowledge and time I devoted to her son. "I've seen changes in my son over the past few months," she said. "Out of nowhere, he started fixing things around the house as soon as I could afford to buy what he needed. I knew Brother Burns was mentoring him, but I never realized how much until the neighbors started paying him to help. Instead of leaving money himself, he put it into our house fund. For the first time in years, we have no bills, no debt, except for a small mortgage on the house. I don't think Brother Burns understands how much he has improved our life. My son finally bought it, gives us a computer, and uses it to repair small appliances. After that, she came over and hugged me tightly, thanking me again. My dad and I exchanged keys when she finished so I could take my kids to lunch and spend some personal time with them. I asked Agnes to tell their mother what we were doing so she wouldn't worry. The last few weeks of Peter and Margaret's lives were now being studied under a microscope. One of the questions they tried to answer was how 9 checks from the Pig and Whistle Bank deposit ended up in a locked box that only Peter had the key to. Another question was where the money came from to pay the delinquent taxes on the property they used for the meetings. They were found to have been put in order and taxes for this year had been prepaid in cash on Wednesday of this week, 1 full day after Peter returns. The city, Peter Reynolds, and Margaret Burns were notified Friday that the lawsuit had been filed. Dale Britton acted quickly and efficiently. He took the case against the city to the mayor himself. Surprisingly, on the same day, an envelope with a set of keys was delivered to the mayor's office. Detectives soon discovered that the keys were the keys to the police station and a copy of the old Pig and Whistle master key. They now believed that it was definitely the work of someone from the police station, since Margaret's desk stood opposite Peter's office and was visible to everyone in the large open room. Of course, they had to turn over what they found to the state, which was now leading the investigation. It was clear that someone could have copied the keys, since Margaret had no way of locking her purse, and it was always near her desk. If she left, someone could easily take them without attracting attention. It was at lunch at Yummy's that I first learned about my children's desire to live with me. I learned that their mother was trying to cope with the end of our marriage. I explained that all too often in life, we don't think about the consequences of our actions until the damage is done. A good example is the number of people who are serving time for stupidity because they didn't stop and think about the opportunity that was in front of them. "Dad," Jean said, "is treason and the only reason why you are divorcing your mother?" "No," I replied. "Cheating is only physical evidence. To get to this point, your mother had to leave the family emotionally, mentally, and spiritually before committing this act. It's the same as Jesus explained when he said, 'I will never leave you.' We are losing faith and moving away from him. Your mother had to separate herself from us and our views on family life in order to start the affair. This act was the final blow to the marriage because it made us all unable to trust her." "Nothing is as easy as it seems," Wade said quietly. "Her own eyes deceived her and led to her downfall. Because of one's behavior, we will all have to live with the consequences." I sat in amazement. My son understood everything and explained it better than I could. He made me wonder where this wisdom came from. "She went from one man to another willingly," Agnes said. "Knowing what she does, that's why I'll never forgive her." To change the conversation, I asked them all what they wanted to see in our new home. This led to an open and honest discussion. As I dropped them off at the curb in front of my old house, I saw Margaret looking out the window. I didn't recognize her. Once the kids reached the house and entered, I drove to my dad's house to get ready for dinner with Tammy. I find out later that Margaret spent the entire evening in her bedroom crying. Tammy saw my old 40s Ford pickup for the first time when I picked her up. We had about 25 minutes to drive to the pizzeria in Marble Hills. We were both dressed casually. Peter has been a bundle of nerves since he got back from his surprise trip, Tammy said. It didn't help when he found out he needed to find a new place to live. I filed divorce papers for him the moment he got off the plane. Did they ask you about his drinking? I asked. More than once, I've given them a few places he likes to go, Tammy said. I mentioned that place you wanted me to talk about. Why was that important? It's not known to many as a front for high-end sex services, I said. The police will discover that he is a client. Tammy started laughing because she thought it was funny. When she calmed down, she said, I'd like to see Margaret's face when she finds out. Well done, Ray. Everything is being done to kick him out of the police force with his reputation completely destroyed, I said. There will be nothing that he can be convicted of, but it will be said that he was forced to leave without reference because of the evidence. His 20-year police career is his whole life, Tammy said. She will be destroyed because he couldn't help himself. I like it. You don't get angry. You get more than just revenge. Then I told her about my day with the kids and mostly what we discussed. Tammy burst into tears as I spoke. You made me see this whole mess from a different perspective, she said. Why haven't I met someone with your logic before? It's because our path in life has made us who we are today, I said. Until now, we may not have had enough experience to develop such an understanding. With these words, digesting them in her head, she came closer to me and said, I'm going to enjoy getting to know you much better. Tammy was impressed with the pizzeria. She met my old friend and his wife. Scott and Trish Tate were having dinner with their young daughter, who was just under 5 years old. We could clearly see that she was about to give birth to a brother or sister for her. I found it funny that she didn't know who he was. They had just arrived before us and invited us to join them. Tammy and Trish seemed to get along. Scott and I talked about all this public turmoil and my plans for the future. Scott said that if I needed funds to buy my soon-to-be ex-wife out of Pig and Whistle, he would be willing to help. I explained to both of them who Tammy was, and they seemed to take it in stride. I learned from him that once Peter was removed, they would promote the captain instead of looking outside to replace him. Scott thought this was what the city should have done from the beginning. If they had done this, none of this would have happened. When Tammy heard this, a smile a mile wide appeared on her face. The extra-large pizza was beyond praise. Between the food and 2 pitchers of beer, we all had too much to eat. It was Trish who suggested getting together the following Saturday night for a casual dinner and dance at Bythias on Bythia. Tammy said it was a date. Trish, if you don't mind me asking, Tammy said, how did you meet Scott? Scott worked as an investigator for the state, Trish explained. On my 29th birthday, I tried to arrest him. We ended up handcuffed to each other, and 11 months later, we were married. Ray can tell you our full story later. Tammy, Trish's parents, have been friends of my family for many years. We met because we both belonged to the Legion, I explained. I met Scott through them. How are Helen and John doing? Busy with my grandchildren, Trish said with a smile. You know, Mommy isn't really happy until they're chasing her. After learning that Tammy was a registered nurse, the women exchanged phone numbers. Scott and Trish paid the bill as we prepared to call it a night. When we got back to her house, I stopped to finish their story. 2 weeks later, Peter Reynolds and Margaret sat at Dunkin' Donuts on Sunday morning, trying to figure out who was trying to destroy it. From a tip that sent him through a hole in the wall, to waking up in the back of a truck naked, to robbing the Pig and Whistle, to paying taxes on the property they were using, to finding stolen checks in a locked drawer, and now claiming that he is a client of an expensive escort service, all this put him in a situation where he was forced to leave. State police and the detectives working with them now believed that it was the Pig and Whistle break and that provided the money for this. Margaret finally admitted that the piece of paper with a combination to the safe was taken from the bottom of her jewelry box at home. After hearing this, the detectives concluded that Peter could have easily discovered this while in her bedroom. Everyone they worked with now believed that he was deliberately using Margaret to hide his bad habits. It got to the point where he didn't even drink alcoholic beverages. He was believed to have been on a drinking binge over the weekend when he disappeared. This was made worse by the media coverage it received. Peter suggested that Margaret's husband might be behind this. Detectives reviewed interview tapes to see his facial expression when he learned of the affair. They had recorded audio of Ray talking to Margaret and her apparently ending the call, then calling his parents for help. Everything they wrote down indicated that he did not know about their relationship. The deciding factor was when the pastor gave him an airtight alibi for the weekend. Raymond Burns was brilliant in his comments, laying the groundwork that he was set up by Margaret and Peter. So good that he doesn't have any reputation left. The questions he raised led detectives in a direction that was very destructive. The circumstantial evidence added up and naturally led to one conclusion. His lawsuit will cost the department dearly. Raymond Burns was seen as untouchable, an innocent who just got caught up in it. Whoever is behind this, Margaret said, has enough knowledge of how the police think to manipulate the evidence that points directly to you. The question is, who have you angered so much inside the department? Your husband was careful, Peter said. Even if he wants something out of the house, he uses a lawyer to get it done. That tells me he's on his mind and is quite capable of doing that. The problem is it would take a team to do it. At least 3 people put you in the truck, Margaret said. Someone inside the department stole my keys and got them back. The key to your locker may have been copied the day you disappeared. The problem is, how did they get the combination to the safe written in my hand? Ultimately, Ray is not evil enough to organize this. The staff even spoke to the property owner, who said it was good to see Peter kept his word. Peter said, "My home will be waiting for me when I am released." You're in a situation where everyone is against you, Margaret said. It looks like you're going to be forced to resign because you've already been stripped of your authority until the investigation is completed. It doesn't help that the detectives think you set them up and led to the arrest of my soon-to-be ex-husband. Is there anything in your past that will give more confidence in circumstantial evidence? The only positive thing I can say is that Tammy didn't try to turn our kids against me, Peter said. They both think I'm getting a little payback for what I did. They refuse to talk about their mother to me at all because, as they say, I gave up the right to know the first time I cheated. At least you still have a relationship with your children, Margaret said. Jean, the eldest, said, "We never left you, Mother. You left us as soon as your eyes turned to your lover. That's why we hurt so much. We didn't see it until it was too late to confront you with this." Now they are looking for a house with their father and are preparing to move in with him. Peter sat in thought, slowly realizing that not only had they destroyed their relationships with their families, but now they had nothing in common as a couple other than the connection between the problems they had brought upon themselves. Hell, they didn't even like each other. I asked a lawyer to arrange for my car to be delivered to my father through a third party. I traded my electric car for a used Ford Explorer and got the difference back. This afternoon, Tammy, my 3 children, and I were house hunting. No, Tammy's relationship with mine was still in the dating stage. She just came with us to be extra eyes. Thanks to our lawyers, Margaret and I reached an agreement. She kept the house and I kept the business. The transfer of ownership has already been documented and registered. The city manager asked his lawyers to review my claim and asked us to wait until the state's investigation was completed. Dale Britton has made it clear that we view this as stalling. We found a nice house with 5 acres of land. It had 4 bedrooms, all on the 2nd floor, with a huge master bedroom and double closet. 4-car garage with open floor plan on main level. It didn't have a basement, but it did have the ability to close off the living room to make it a safe room during a tornado. Wade liked the extra building that came with the package because we could turn it into a car repair shop. We all agreed that the house needed repainting and new flooring on the main floor. I wanted to use laminate throughout the entire downstairs because of the ease of maintenance. Tammy thought the house was otherwise modern. I said I wanted to replace the staircase lighting with LED lighting and integrate it into the ceiling, along with most of the downstairs ceiling lights. I thought the price was high, so I made an offer significantly lower. Tammy called her kids, and we all met at Red Lobster for dinner. Both Tammy and I were surprised that the kids all knew each other, even though they were a couple years older than her and in post-high school. That evening, when I dropped my children off at their mother's house, Tammy was with me. I found out from my children the next day that when their mother saw us together, she was furious. In pure rage, Margaret demanded answers to questions they didn't have because this was the first time they had met her. She got really angry when Wade told her, "What Dad does with his life is none of your business anymore, after you chose to throw him away for Mr. Reynolds." A month later, just after 9 on Tuesday morning, Peter Reynolds took one last look at his office at the police station. A government investigation concluded that while there was no evidence linking him, everything indirectly pointed to him. The drinking binge he was on and where he was found made conviction impossible. The mayor and police captain accepted his badge and gun. He was given a choice: quit or be fired. In any case, no recommendation will be made because of what the evidence indicated. He decided to resign with immediate effect, provided Margaret Burns was not indicted. Whoever set him up did it masterfully. His career was ruined because he allowed his eyes to focus on someone else. Margaret watched as Peter walked out of the police station doors, a broken man. There were no farewell words or good luck wishes. Everyone was glad to be rid of him. There has been too much drama over the past few months due to his questionable behavior. Peter was forced to leave the city. He could not find work here. Constant questions from the media guaranteed this. Margaret felt that she was losing the only friend she had left in the world. Most of the people they interacted with regularly no longer spoke to her. Even her children were busy packing in preparation for moving into their father's new home. The house she thought was too small will now be too big just for her. It made her sad, realizing how unimportant it was now. Although her relationship with her children slowly improved, she knew that the trust and love they once had for her was forever changed. Peter and she searched, but found nothing about Tammy and Ray's relationship. All they could prove was that they met after that terrible weekend that shattered the world of everyone involved. Raymond was himself, keeping everything inside and refusing to talk about anything other than the children. He and the children spent the weekend choosing furniture for their bedrooms. From what she saw of his new house, it was larger than their old one and had more land. He asked for the opportunity to pick up all his equipment for the workshop that Saturday and asked that she not be there when he did so. As his lawyer said, she was his past and he was trying to leave it behind. Margaret had just left the police station for the day when she saw Tammy standing there with glee. The news of her husband's imminent departure from work was on the news at noon. "Peter is broke, you know. The prenuptial agreement was very clear because my father is a lawyer and wrote it," Tammy said. "If either of us cheats, we lose everything we put into the marriage except the original value of my trust. It's sad because he can't even afford a creature like you." "Do you know who knocked him down?" asked Margaret. "Yeah, I know," Tammy said with a big smile. "They say all dogs go back to their vomit. Peter came back and it ruined him." Margaret realized what Tammy meant and lost her composure. She came at her with pure hatred, intending to kill the bitch. Tammy was ready and answered. The staff had to come out and separate them. Both women will get a black eye that will be difficult to hide with makeup. They were separated and Tammy was advised to leave so that both ladies would calm down. Tammy's daughter called me about what happened. Her mother took the weekend off to help me set up the house. I'll start moving into tomorrow since the contractors were finishing up the cleanup today. I got a 10-year open mortgage at 3.5% thanks to a large down payment from my corporation's retained earnings. I spent the night doing ice packs to help reduce the swelling. Tamara thought it was funny that two middle-aged women were acting like immature children because of a man. "Ray," she asked while her mother showered, "are you starting to heal?" "I think your mother and I have helped each other," I said. Ease the pain. We're still in the friend stage, but we're both interested in seeing where it goes without rushing each other. Mom thanks you for helping her get through all of this, Tamara said. She said you were the one who made her see that her marriage was over before the affair began. I'm still trying to figure out how that's possible. To have an affair, a person had to be emotionally distant from the partner, I said. Instead of working on the relationship, they had already decided they wanted a new one. The affair happened because they thought the marriage was dead. We were still discussing this issue when Tammy sat down next to me and said, I knew there was a problem, Tamara, even before moving here. I thought moving would give us a fresh start. I was wrong. It takes two to make a relationship work, with both giving 110%. I did, your father didn't. Ray can say the same about Margaret. Once your partner stops doing this, your relationship is in danger. Mom, Ray, I have a boyfriend who's starting to get serious, she said. Should I discuss this with him? We both said yes. 3 weeks later, Judge MacDonald lowered his gavel, ending the marriage of Margaret and me. I was given primary custody of our 3 children due to their wishes. Margaret had unlimited access. The mayor, due to Margaret's involvement with Peter, gave her a 1-year suspended sentence. The terms we agreed upon were approved by him. Margaret and I went outside and sat on a bench because it was time to clear things up. I lost myself as soon as Peter came back into my life, Margaret said. I want you to know that. I realize now that I had unresolved issues that I forgot about, just like he did. Don't blame yourself for it. This was all between Peter and me. Thanks for that, I said. That answers a lot of questions. I'm offering you a civilized relationship in the future, nothing more. I won't even call you a friend. Outside of our children's lives, we will stay away from each other because it will take me a long time to forgive you. It's more than I expected, she said. Our pastor suggested that I find a new church because many would not let go of what happened, so I started looking. As for our children, when we agree on something, I will always check it with you to make sure it doesn't conflict with your plans. When she got up and left, I had to fight myself not to say, Stop, let's try again, even though I knew I didn't love her anymore. It took a few minutes to realize that it would take time to move away from the usual. Fortunately, the relationship that Tammy and I have built will allow us to overcome our shared past. Margaret will never know that the greatest gift she ever gave me came in those last moments. In her words, she gave me the freedom to move forward. And subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.